Is Draymond a fake tough guy? Is he calculated?
Meaning, what does that mean?
That means that he is very good at engaging.
Maybe he
with
just
you.
hasn't. I think what Kmart is saying is that he hasn't started something with the wrong person. For instance, do you remember when Boogie Cousins, DeMarcus Cousins, went against Zach Randolph and was trying that with Zach Randolph, and Zach Randolph said, "I put fear in the bullies." He picked on the wrong one, because DeMarcus used to go after just about everyone, but he wouldn't go after Zach Randolph, right? And I think that's what Kmart is saying. Like, you're not going after the real tough. You're not going after all the enforcers.
Draymond Green just made the biggest mistake of his career, and it has nothing to do with basketball. One word, that's all it took to ignite a war between two of the most intense players the NBA has ever seen. And now, legends are picking sides, secrets from locker room fights are being exposed, and the entire basketball world is watching this thing spiral out of control. This isn't just another social media beef, this is personal, this is about respect, legacy, and two players who refuse to back down. And by the end of this video, you're going to see why this might be the realest NBA drama we've had in years. So here's what happened. Kenyon Martin went on Gil's Arena podcast and dropped a bomb that Draymond couldn't ignore. Martin didn't just criticize Draymond's game, he went after something way deeper. He called Draymond soft. He said Draymond is a fake tough guy who only picks fights with players he knows won't really come back at him. Martin claimed that everything Draymond does on the court is calculated, that it's not real aggression, it's just an act designed to look tough without any real consequences. Now, you have to understand something. In the NBA, you can question a player's skills, you can say they're overrated, you can even say they don't deserve their awards, but calling someone fake, calling them soft, that's the one thing that cuts deeper than anything else. That's attacking a player's entire identity. And Draymond, he wasn't about to let that slide. Not from anyone, and especially not from someone who shares his hometown. Both Draymond and Kenyon are from Saginaw, Michigan. They're supposed to have each other's backs. So when Kenyon came at him like that, Draymond felt betrayed. He thought there would be some hometown loyalty, some mutual respect between two players who made it out of the same city and carved out legendary careers in the league. But instead of letting it go, Draymond responded with the most brutal comeback possible. He went on his podcast and called Kenyon Martin an underachiever. He said that for a #1 overall pick, Martin's career was disappointing. 1 All-Star appearance, 0 championships, 0 all-defensive teams. Despite all his talk about being an elite defender, Draymond basically said that if he retired today, his career would be way better than Martin's ever was, and that's when this thing exploded into something nobody could ignore.
Okay, this message is to Kenyon and Draymond only. I'm going to talk about both of you guys to you guys. Kenyon, or first of all, Draymond. Let me talk about Kenyon first. Kenyon was, and I know you know this, this is how I'm going to talk about both of you guys. Kenyon was maybe the most elite defender, physically, communication-wise, intensity, all the things. That's who Kenyon was. Kenyon showed up. He had a chance at Rookie of the Year, but was coming off a major injury, was still the #1 pick. That's how dominant he was in high school or in college. And when I got there and I was a defender, Kenyon was so elite defensively. The Nets were picked to finish second to last. Go ahead, I know it was 25 years ago. We were picked to finish second to last in our conference. We led the conference start to finish and went to the finals. And that was because, in my opinion, of obviously Jason Kidd was our Steph Curry. But Kenyon Martin was our Draymond Green.
Martin didn't take that lying down. He jumped on Instagram Live and started breaking down why calling him an underachiever is complete nonsense. He pointed out that he led the Nets to the NBA Finals in just his second season. You know how rare that is. Only 5 players in NBA history have done that. Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Walton, Elgin Baylor, and Kenyon Martin. That's the company he's in. Those are all Hall of Famers and all-time greats. Then Martin dropped a stat that had everyone's jaw on the floor. He said, Draymond has played in more games where he scored 0 points, 46 games, than games where he scored 20 or more points, only 44 games. Think about that. A 4-time All-Star and former Defensive Player of the Year has more scoreless performances than 20-point games. Martin was basically saying, you're calling me an underachiever when your offense is non-existent, but here's where things get even crazier. NBA legends started weighing in and they weren't holding back. Reggie Miller, the Hall of Famer who knows a thing or two about toughness, basically sided with Kenyon Martin. Miller went on the Dan Patrick Show and explained exactly what Martin was trying to say about Draymond being a fake tough guy, and he used a perfect example that everyone remembers. players. Miller brought up the time DeMarcus Cousins tried to bully Zach Randolph. Cousins was known for going at everyone, getting in people's faces, playing physical, doing whatever it took to intimidate opponents. But when he tried that with Zach Randolph, it backfired completely. Z-Bo looked at him and said something that became legendary in NBA circles: "I put fear in the bullies." Randolph wasn't scared of Cousins, and Cousins knew it. From that point on, Cousins never really tested Z-Bo again. That's the point Miller was making. He said that Martin is arguing Draymond hasn't started something with the wrong person yet. Draymond goes after guys he knows won't really escalate things to that next level. He'll chest bump someone, he'll talk trash, he'll even throw a few shoves here and there. But according to Martin and now Miller, Draymond is smart about who he does that with. He's not going after the real enforcers, the guys who would actually make him pay for crossing that line. Miller straight up said, "You're not going after the real tough guys, you're not going after all the enforcers." And that statement hit different because it's coming from Reggie Miller, someone who played in an era where toughness meant something completely different. Miller played against the bad boy Pistons, against the Knicks teams with Anthony Mason and Charles Oakley, against players who would actually hurt you if you crossed them. So when Miller co-signs what Kenyon Martin is saying, it adds serious weight to the argument. This isn't just some random retired player talking. This is a legend who knows what real toughness looks like. But the most explosive take came from someone who actually played with both Draymond and Kenyon Martin, Richard Jefferson. Jefferson went on his Road Trippin' podcast and delivered a message directly to both players, and what he said was absolutely wild because RJ has firsthand experience with both of them. He knows their games, he knows their personalities, and he knows exactly how intense they can get. In fact, Jefferson admitted that he actually fought Kenyon Martin in the locker room during their time together on the Nets. Let that sink in. Richard Jefferson, who's not known as some hothead or fighter, got into an actual physical altercation with Kenyon Martin. That tells you everything about how Kenyon was wired back then. Jefferson started by giving Kenyon his flowers. He said that when Martin came into the league as the number 1 pick in 2000, even though he was coming off a major injury from his college days at Cincinnati, he immediately transformed the Nets. The team was predicted to finish second to last in their conference. Nobody expected anything from them. But with Jason Kidd running the point and Kenyon Martin anchoring the defense, they led the conference from start to finish and made it all the way to the NBA Finals. RJ said Kenyon was maybe the most elite defender he'd ever seen at that point. Physically dominant, incredible communication, intensity off the charts. Kenyon could guard positions 1 through 5, and remember, this was an era when big men were actually big.
1,000%. Kenyon Martin, guard 1 through 5. We could switch 1 through 4 with Jason Kidd and him. He could guard 1 through 5. He's skinny. He's a skinny boy. So the same toughness of being undersized and having to go against Alonzos and Tim Duncans and those dudes, Kenyon was very similar to you, Draymond, as an individual that would fight against people. Kenyon Martin was both of y'all have been to anger management, and rightfully so. Both of you guys have. And I've played with both of you, and you both need it, and it's also both of your guys' superpower, that intensity. That intensity is both of your guys' superpower, so I'm not surprised that two alphas in this space don't get along. I will not disrespect Draymond and all of his accomplishments, but I'm sure is not going to disrespect Kenyon and his ability. He was a one-time All-Star, but think about it. He has no all-defensive team, I don't believe, but he helmed the number 1 defense from my first year and my second year, our 2 NBA Finals years, right? Our 2 NBA Finals years. He helmed the number 1 defense. He was the center. He was the 2. He was guarding every position. He was that dude. While he should have, in my opinion, it was maybe his rebounding numbers weren't high enough because you had the Ben Wallaces, you had those Dikembes. How are you not on an all-defensive team in Kenyon's defense unless you know, or if you're running those 2 top defenses, you should be on the all-defensive team. Now, let me say this about Kenyon. We went to 2 NBA Finals. We were tied 2-2 with Tim Duncan and the Spurs. Obviously, we lost to Shaq and them. We won 10 straight in the postseason back in 2002. 10 straight in the postseason, Dre. You know how hard that is. That's intensity, that's focus, that's locked in. 10 straight. Then we followed up, and we swept the Knicks the next year. So we won 14 straight games versus our conference. That was the defensive intensity that Kenyon held. Obviously, J. Kidd was the dude. He was the all-defensive guy. Kenyon should have been there. Kenyon was elite.
Shaquille O'Neal was in his prime. Tim Duncan was dominating. Kevin Garnett was a force. These weren't stretch fives who shot threes. These were 7-footers who would punish you in the post. And Kenyon, who was undersized for a power forward, would switch onto all of them without hesitation. Jefferson pointed out something that a lot of people forget. The Nets went to back-to-back NBA Finals in 2002 and 2003. Both years they had the number one defense in the league, and Kenyon Martin was the anchor of that defense. He never made an all-defensive team, not even once. But he was leading the top-ranked defense in the NBA 2 years in a row. How does that happen? Jefferson said it's because the awards were biased. Kenyon's rebounding numbers weren't as flashy as Ben Wallace or Kevin Garnett, so he got overlooked. His reputation for getting suspended hurt him in the voting, but anyone who actually watched those Nets teams knew that Kenyon was the heart and soul of their defense. Then RJ dropped the real bombshell. He said that both Kenyon and Draymond have been to anger management, and both of them needed it. That intensity, that edge they play with, it's both their superpower and their biggest weakness. They can't turn it off, and that's why RJ wasn't surprised that two alphas like this don't get along. But here's the part that everyone is talking about. Jefferson looked directly into the camera and said, Dre, if this was 2004 and you talked to Kenyon the way you talked to other players, y'all would have fought 100%. RJ didn't sugarcoat it. He said he watched Kenyon fight Karl Malone. He watched him fight Tracy McGrady. Kenyon would go at anyone, superstar or not, and he didn't care about the consequences. Jefferson said that's why he ended up getting so many starts early in his career, because every time Kenyon got suspended, which was a lot, RJ would move into the starting lineup. Jefferson explained that Kenyon Martin was on the cover of Sports Illustrated with the headline, Flagrant Flyer, because he was flagrant fouling people left and right. The NBA told him he had to stop showing his badass yellow boy tattoo when he dunked on people because it was causing too many problems. That's the level of intensity Kenyon played with. That's the kind of player he was. And RJ's point was simple. Draymond can talk all he wants about his 4 championships and his Defensive Player of the Year award, but if he would have played in that era and tried the same stuff with Kenyon that he does with other players today, it wouldn't have been allowed. They would have fought on the spot, not later, not after the game, right there on the court. Jefferson said, the dynamic is different in 2020. It doesn't allow things to get that way. But in 2004, you two would have fought, and that's just facts.
This is how I'm going to lead into Draymond. Kenyon was so elite, we never went to the finals again without him. We never went to another conference finals. We went to multiple playoffs, we never went to another conference. Obviously, Kenyon had, I think, the knee surgery, the microfracture, so he was a good player, but never the ability to be a great player, in my opinion. I love you, Kenyon, but that's just the true after the knee surgery. But Kenyon was that dude. Now, Draymond, part of the reason why many months ago I said, Draymond, you are the most important defender of this generation, and that's based off of my knowledge of Kenyon Martin. That's my knowledge of Kenyon Martin and what he would do, right? That's why in Golden State, if they lose you, right, it's a problem. Same way when we lost Kenyon, we never went to a conference finals. Now, to Kenyon's point, Dre, I love you to death. Kenyon, he was a little different up there, right? There's that Ron Artest, there's that Kenyon Martin gene, right? Where it's like, hey, you don't want them to see red. You don't want those Bulls to see red. I personally don't believe that if you two were on the court at the exact same time and you were being Draymond and he was being Kenyon, if this was 2004, Dre, you would have had some issues. If it was 2020, I think the dynamic is different. It's not allowed to get that way. If you were playing with Kenyon, because I watched him club Karl Malone, I watched him club Tracy McGrady, and part of the reason why I got the start, or they traded Keith Van Horn, is because every time Kenyon would get suspended, and it was a lot, I would get to start. I would become the starting small forward. So that's what I'm expressing, is that if you, and this is not saying that Draymond, you would have talked how you talked, because that's who you are. But if you would have talked like that to Kenyon in 2004, when he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated with his chest out saying badass yellow boy, and the NBA told him he had to stop showing that tattoo when he would dunk on people, y'all would have fought 100%. I saw him, y'all would have fought 100%.
He did get suspended a lot.
He got suspended a lot. He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated and it said flagrant flyer because he was flagrant fouling people. Who else does that sound like? Draymond, right? Y'all are very, very similar. You are both at your peak, elite defenders. So please stop arguing. Neither of you guys are going to win this argument. You guys are not going to win it. You both are some of the greatest I've ever seen. You both are a little different, all right? But just know this, Dre, I will respect Kenyon because I fought him in a locker room, right? Because we were chirping back and forth.
Why would you do that?
Because I'm crazy too. I'm just a different type of crazy as these two. But I'm just saying, Dre, if he would fight Tracy McGrady and he would fight Karl Malone and he would fight damn near anyone in the NBA, and I saw him do and talk to everyone that way, you and him would have fought. And that's kind of what Kenyon liked. And you would have been okay with it. But make no mistake, if you would have tried to talk to him like you've talked to other players, that would have never been allowed. I watched it for multiple years. That was not allowed. And you would have still did it and y'all would have fought. That's the only thing that I'm telling you, that's factual. And Kenyon, I'm going to express to you, Draymond is special. He's annoying because all the things you don't like about yourself, you see in him, right? He's annoying. He is the most important defender of this generation. Draymond is. So stop disrespecting each other. Start to support each other and squash this. Because y'all both a little different, but what y'all both accomplished is game changing. Kenyon took a franchise with no relevance and took them to the finals based off of his defense. And once he left, they have not been to the conference finals since. That shows who he is, and it's very similar to who Draymond is.
So now we're left with this massive question that's dividing the entire basketball world. Who's actually right in this beef? Kenyon Martin came back at Draymond with receipts. He explained that leading a team to the finals in your second year puts you in legendary company. He averaged 16.7 points and 9.5 rebounds during his All-Star season. He played 15 years in the league, despite multiple injuries, and he made it clear that everything he accomplished, he did without riding the coattails of a generational offensive talent like Steph Curry. That last part stings because it's true, Draymond's entire career has been built playing alongside one of the greatest shooters in NBA history. Remove Steph Curry from those Warriors teams, and would Draymond have 4 championships? Would he even have one? That's the argument Martin is making. He's saying Draymond is a glue guy, a role player who happened to be in the perfect situation. His career averages of 8.7 points, 6.9 rebounds, and 5.6 assists aren't exactly screaming superstar. Martin even put together a list of 50 power forwards he believes are better than Draymond. The list included obvious names like Giannis Antetokounmpo, Anthony Davis, Dirk Nowitzki, Charles Barkley, Kevin Garnett, Tim Duncan, Karl Malone, and Chris Bosh. But it also included guys like Amari Stoudemire and Chris Webber. Martin was basically saying that Draymond isn't even a top 50 power forward of all time when you actually look at individual talent rather than team success. And you know what? Some people agree with him. Paul Pierce weighed in on his No Fouls Given podcast and said something controversial. He claimed that if you put both players on TV and just watch them without knowing their accolades, Kenyon Martin looks like the better player. Pierce said Draymond will have more All-Star appearances and more awards, but from a pure talent perspective, Kenyon was more skilled. Pierce even went as far as saying that if you replaced Draymond with Kenyon on those Warriors teams, they still would have won 4 championships. That's a wild statement. But Pierce's point was that the Warriors needed toughness and defense, and Kenyon could have provided that just as well as Draymond did. But then you have people like Jeff Teague defending Draymond, saying his value can't be measured by statistics. Teague argued that Draymond is the ultimate team player who sacrifices his own numbers for the good of the team. He's the emotional leader, the defensive anchor, the guy who holds everyone accountable. Without Draymond, those Warriors championships don't happen. And that's actually true too. Golden State tried to move forward without Draymond in certain playoff series, and they struggled. When he's on the floor, the team just functions differently. He's the one calling out defensive assignments, setting bone-crushing screens, making the extra pass, doing all the dirty work that doesn't show up in a box score. So we're stuck with 2 different ways of measuring greatness. Do you value individual talent and dominance, like what Kenyon Martin brought to the table, or do you value winning and team success, which is what Draymond has built his entire legacy on? Richard Jefferson gave probably the most balanced take of anyone. He said both players are elite defenders who changed the game in their respective eras. He urged them to stop disrespecting each other and recognize that they're more similar than different. Both have that fire that makes them great but also gets them in trouble. Both have been to anger management. Both are undersized players who made up for it with intensity and intelligence. RJ said, "You're both annoying because all the things you don't like about yourself, you see in each other." And that might be the realest statement in this entire beef. Draymond sees a version of himself in Kenyon, someone who talks trash, plays physical, and refuses to back down. Kenyon sees a version of himself in Draymond, someone whose intensity sometimes crosses the line. The difference is the era they played in and the teams they were on. Kenyon took a Nets franchise with no relevance and carried them to back-to-back finals appearances. After he left, they never made it back to the conference finals. That's how important he was to that team. Draymond has been part of a dynasty, winning 4 championships, but he's been surrounded by Hall of Fame talent his entire career. Kenyon extended an open invitation for Draymond to come on Gil's Arena and hash things out face-to-face. He said, "There is an open invitation, brother, but you are not going to call me an underachiever. I stand on it. I played 15 years for a reason. But here's the thing. Draymond probably won't take that invitation because deep down, both of these players know that if they sit down in the same room, their personalities are going to clash. They're too similar, too proud, too competitive to ever fully squash this beef. And honestly, that's what makes this so entertaining. We're watching two players who defined toughness in their respective eras go at each other with everything they've got. No filter, no holding back, just pure uncut basketball debate that's getting personal. So who won this battle? That depends on what you value. If you care about championships and accolades, Draymond takes it. 4 rings, Defensive Player of the Year, multiple All-Star appearances. But if you care about individual impact and talent, Kenyon has a serious case, leading a team to the finals in year 2, anchoring the league's best defense without recognition, playing through the most physical era in modern NBA history. The truth is, they're both right and they're both wrong, and that's exactly why this beef isn't going away anytime soon. What do you think? Is Draymond a fake tough guy who picks his battles, or is Kenyon just bitter that his career didn't end with a championship? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you made it this far, hit that like button and subscribe because we're going to keep covering every twist and turn in this drama. This is far from over.